Welcome to another episode of On the Shot at 4thStreetFunny.com. We're here with this week's guest, Pat Godwin. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Just finished the show. Laying back a little bit.
Just wrapped up your whole weekend. How was your whole weekend?
It was fantastic. It was really good. We had one kind of drunky, crazy show. We handled that fine. The rest have been really focused and fun.
Well, you were saying earlier, you were the first comic to play this club.
Well, play is an exaggeration. I was the first comic that was here booked for it. But from Wednesday through Sunday, we started on Wednesday back then, now it's Thursday, something went wrong at the club. So I was staying, the seal bog would come down, we did media for it, but we didn't open the first week. So I was booked for the first week, and they had issues. Every new club's got bugs that they got to work out, the kitchen and everything, so I didn't actually perform at all. Did all the media for it. We brought the media down, and they fed them, we had a good time, but we had problems with the PA, and then finally they got it working great. And I did it a year later, it was phenomenal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, you once had a song, The Legend of John Fox.
Yeah, one of my favorite inside jokes of all time.
What is the worst John Fox story you've experienced or heard, or...
Well,
because there's got to be millions.
The thing is that I was just starting to work with Bob and Tom, and they gave me a bunch of their CDs to listen to do the show. They wanted me to get a feel of the show, and Tom and I had talked about doing an album together. So I listened to all their CDs, and the constant thing was that it was John Fox did a joke on all their CDs. But I had heard all these John Fox stories, and I thought, well, they must know him. If I have this inside jokey song about him, it's going to kill. I had never met him. I'd only heard the stories. So I took the stories and mixed, put them all in the song. The song came out great, great little melody. But I mean, and then I would call people and ask them for John Fox stories. And so I was inundated, and I took the best of them. I put the mayonnaise in there. He was supposedly, would do bad things to the mayonnaise at the Comedy Condo. One of the best stories I heard, he was in Atlanta one time, and one of the CNN announcers was on, and she was gorgeous. I forget what her name was. And John was bragging that he was going to get her that whole week. And the other comedian's like, yeah, bull! And the final night, somehow he went down and found out where she hung out after her shift. He hooked up with her and woke up with her the next day and was like, as she was coming out doing the walk of shame, he was like, I told you, son, and she was so humiliated. Here was this like famous CNN on-air personality. Yeah!
And that is a walk of shame. He does not look like a guy that you would want to walk away from.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that may be one of my favorite pieces. I can't do it live. No one knows what I'm talking about. Sometimes people will yell it out, but other comedians or people in the business will always bring it up, and that thrills me. I love that song.
Kind of like the Aristocrats joke or something.
Exactly.
Secret handshake.
Exactly. Because we all know John Fox. He never really made it. But John Fox was one of those guys that people admired back then. They looked up to. Even Seinfeld. He had great presence. But because of booze and his issues, it just kind of disintegrated and he became a joke. But he's the wildest guy to this day. He probably, is suffering from it health-wise, but he is still as wild as you've ever heard. And I think he does it on purpose just so you have your own John Fox story. I hung out with him one night after the song was released, and he did it up for me. He got in a fight. He was talking about some girl's breasts, and the boyfriend hit him, and all the John Fox greatness. Have you met him at all ever?
I have. I met him last summer. He was in town.
At the Comedy Caravan,
yeah.
The other club.
And he was pissed off and angry and bitter as
yes.
always.
Yes.
He's like the creepy uncle that nobody wants to sit next to at the family reunion.
Yeah. And comedians have, they've posted stuff of him actually doing stuff back in the condo from their cameras. He doesn't even know he's being recorded. So it's like a great thing to capture John doing something illegal back at the condo. And here he is, a 60-year-old guy.
I was going to ask, do you remember your first time on stage?
My first time on stage was when I did music. I was like 20 years old. I worked back in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, doing my own original songs. And so I'd been on stage a long time before I did comedy, about 10 years. I was 31 when I did my first open mic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, real late.
Did it go well, or were you kind of...
It actually did. Todd Glass, who works here at the Improv quite a bit, would come to see me at this Philadelphia bar, and he said, you're really funny in between the songs. I think that could be more of your thing. The songs are good, don't get me wrong, but you're really funny. You might be a comedian. I remember being offended at the time. But he would come every week, Todd Glass, and finally he took me down to the Comedy Works to do my first open mic. And I strung a bunch of impressions together. I really didn't have any kind of act. I did just some of whoever was on the radio at that time. I did an impression of that person, and I got this radio gig the next day with the Morning Zoo. They said, the guy who ran the Morning Zoo said, could you do these funny songs on a daily basis? And I lied, and I said yes, and I was hired. So Todd Glass changed my whole career.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the best thing, food or otherwise, that's ever been in your mouth?
The best food?
Best thing, food or otherwise. It's whatever.
That's a great question. Would that be my wife?
What is your most embarrassing moment ever on stage?
Oh, embarrassing would have to be where I maybe went over the line and someone has charged the stage when I first started out, because I have an aggressive kind of, take no prisoners act, and I don't really suffer fools gladly. So if there's pockets of annoyance out there, I'll deal with it as opposed to barreling through. And sometimes you cross a line with the person who's having a couple of pops. And embarrassing is when you don't read that properly, and then they get aggressive, and then you look like the jackass. So I think that'd have to be the most embarrassing. Specifically, I really have, there's so many moments that I'm not proud of where I cross the line. But in the last like 7 years, I rarely do that. I've learned how to just come up to the line.
Can you name the first 5 Led Zeppelin albums?
I cannot. I think we have Physical Graffiti.
It's the 6.
It's
number 6.
I think they were all just called Led Zeppelin, weren't they?
It was 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Houses of the Holy.
That's a good question.
And then the last question I have for you today is, have you ever heard a joke or written a joke that you were too afraid to retell or tell on stage?
Something I thought was either so over...
Just crash or too far gone?
Well, I did it tonight, and I think I remember seeing Bobby laugh. When you make fun of deaf people, it's not really funny or clever, but the Marley Matlin Christmas Carol is one that I thought of, and I did to my brother in the car. If you make your brother, who's also in the entertainment business, laugh at something that's so crass and so evil, but that laugh, it's funny to people in the business. So on Sunday night, I'll pull that out, and I did it tonight. But yeah, that's one of those ones where, not a joke necessarily, but where I do the deaf thing, and it's just kind of evil.
Okay,
That's a good example.
I appreciate the time.
Oh, thanks for
having us. End these little interviews with a shot of Kentucky bourbon.
All right.
So here we go.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week.